Okay, so today's top 10 is about production-based cars, meaning they were built out of a streetcar body, body in white, welded up, or contained at least some portion of the production vehicle's body or frame. We'll clarify that a little later on. But as always, these lists are arbitrary, capricious, and subject to my individual whims, whatever pops in my head or whatever I think is the top 10 best cars, and they are in no particular order. They are simply a group of the 10 best cars per my opinion. Okay, here we go. Number 1, Skyline GTR R32. In particular, I'm talking about the Group A type car, or the Australian touring car version. Basically the early 90s R32 twin turbo RB26, a Tesla all-wheel drive system, super Hicus 4-wheel steering, just the monster, the car that went to Australia and dominated the Australia Touring Car Championship with gentleman Jim Richards and Bo Scaife, and terrorized Japan touring car racing as well. Before there was Gran Turismo, this was a car we only saw in magazines in the 90s. And even there, it had sort of a fearsome reputation as Nissan's most potent car. And it was odd because we didn't get that car here in the United States. So where we were thinking 300ZX, we would see this thing called the Skyline in magazines, and they would talk about it. And we knew that it encompassed technology from the mid-4 concept car. But other than that, it was just sort of a mystery to us until the internet era hit real hard, and we were able to see images and video from Japan and see what this car was all about. Car number 2, the Audi 90 Quattro, the IMSA GTO car. Now technically this is a silhouette car, but it did contain, I think the roof panel was actually from the production automobile, so I'm counting this in the production-derived type cars. And this car was I think really this was a slightly reworked Group B drivetrain shoved into a Kevlar and tube frame sedan that contained enough body panels for it to be called a GTO car per IMSA standards. But the car was, I don't want to say dominant, but it was pretty dominant. It won 7 of the 13 races it entered. The problem is it did not enter Daytona or Sebring that year, so they did not accrue enough points to win the constructor's title. But it won more than half the races it was entered in, and that's saying something. And it had quite a driver lineup too. Hans-Joachim Stuck, Hurley Haywood, and Walter Roll. So we're talking about 3 Hall of Fame category type drivers. Just a really cool car, and you always know a car is on the money when they ban it the next season. So, I think there was a video called The Unfair Advantage about this car. It was just an incredible automobile. Up next, Mercedes-Benz 190E 2.5 16 Evolution. Again, this is one of those cars where it was a homologated street car built to a certain rule set, and enough street vehicles built to homologate certain aerodynamic and fender add-ons for racing purposes. And then they went out and dominated the race scene. They dominated for a number of years. European touring car racing, German touring car racing. This car was even used in the Macau Grand Prix way out in China when they were still running DTM rules. So this is a car that was, a highly collectible street car and a very capable track machine. And it's rare that you have a car be both things in the same package. So a really special vehicle. And one that if I was filthy rich, and I'm not a German car guy, but if I was filthy rich, I would have one of these in my garage, definitely. Up next, the BMW M1. And this is another one of those homologation specials gone wrong. Italian body, German mechanicals, should have been the ultimate car, but instead it's almost a footnote in the history books. The category of racing that it was built for, it never really raced in. It ended up being a one-make series and then used in some European racing series later on, but it never got to be what it was meant to be, even though the car is a beast. I've seen some in-car ride-along footage, and it's just the noises that it makes and the fire that it spits out its exhaust. It's just awesome. And to think that this is sort of the genesis of what we now know as the BMW M cars, whether that be the M3, the M5, M4 now I guess they have, or the 1M. There are a lot of great things that descended from this car, sort of as it became the pinnacle of BMW motorsports there for a few years. And that Pro Car series was just awesome. I mean, the Formula One drivers driving these single make cars and in support races was just really cool. Up next, okay, I'm going to cheat here because I'm talking Porsche 911. And when we talk 911, I know they're different, you know. There's 930, 993, 996, 997, 991, all of that. But I'm lumping them all together. They're all 911, so we're going to lump them all together. Air-cooled, water-cooled, whatever. 911 is a 911. And in that sense, it is probably the single most dominant production-style race car in the history of race cars. You know, the classic air-cooled original 911 won the Targa Florio. It won at Daytona. It won at Sebring. The 934 was a variation of the 911, and it won European GT and it won Trans Am. The 935 was a variation of the production 911, and it won the 1979 24 Hours of Le Mans. The Porsche 911 won the predecessor of the World Rally Championship in 1970. 911 variant customer cars have been driven in One Make Series and IROC and all kinds of racing series around the world. The 953, which was a four-wheel drive variant of the 911, won the Paris-Dakar Rally in 1984. That four-wheel drive system was later adapted to the 959, which itself was a variant of the 911. So, you know, there's no way you can talk about racing in the 20th century and the Porsche 911 not enter the conversation in some form or fashion. I mean, it donated its engine to the 956 and the 962, and really the 911 GT1. All of those cars were based off of turbocharged flat six engines that were developed off of the original 911. So it earns a special place on this list. Number 6. Okay. The Mazda Miata. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I have a love-hate relationship with Miatas. I love rear-wheel drive four-cylinder cars, which is why I drive 240s. And if the Miata had a true hardtop, like a permanent fixed roof coupe or hatchback version, I'd probably own one. I actually test drove one before I bought my first 240SX, but I don't do convertibles. I need a hard roof over my head because I'm paranoid. During my autocross career, the Miatas owned the 2000 SCCA Nationals. Out of 56 entries in the B stock class, 52 of them were Miatas. That's all you need to know. And the Miata is never a car you would call fast in its normally aspirated version. It wasn't a drag strip car, but it was very nimble and carried speed through corners very well. And I've chased more than one of them around a road course in my day. Chase is the operative word there because the Miata was smaller and lighter and had almost as much horsepower. Certainly a very similar power to weight ratio. And they were well supported for motorsports. The Spec Miata fields at nasty events were just a sight to behold. This fleet of little buzzy Miatas flinging around the track. Up next, the Lotus Esprit X180R. What can I say? The second generation Esprit Turbo was an iconic car of my childhood. Even the first generation Esprit, really. It showed up in a couple of James Bond movies, and I thought that was cool. And then in the 90s, when they redesigned it, it got faster and better looking. And suddenly here you had this four-cylinder mid-engine car that was going toe-to-toe with the best in the world, with the Corvette ZR1s and the Lamborghini Countaches and the Ferrari Testarossas of the day. And then they went racing with it. And I got to see this thing in the Bridgestone Supercar Challenge every weekend. And it was absolutely fabulous. I'm a bigger fan of the four-cylinder Esprit than the V8, but that's just a personal thing. I always like the idea of the four-cylinder fighting above its weight class. But again, that's a personal preference. Stylistically, on the exterior, they look pretty much the same, the cars of that era. So again, that's just a preference. Number 8, the Chevrolet Corvette, specifically the C4 Corvette, the Corvette Challenge and Bridgestone Supercar versions. This was an interesting thing that happened. So the Corvette was racing in one category, and it was so dominant, I guess, that they banned it. And so then it ended up in a one make series for a while, and then they integrated it back into Bridgestone Supercar. So there was a weird period there in the 80s and 90s where the Corvette was sort of part of other racing series and then was on its own and then went back. But that particular look of C4, probably in the era right before the ZR1 became a thing, it was really cool for a C4 Corvette, because these were cars you saw pretty much everywhere. But the racing car with the 5-star magnesium wheels, and it was just a different look, and it was really cool. Number 9 on my list, the Mini, the original Mini, the one that was built from 1959 to 2000, the Austin Mini, the Austin 7, the Leyland Mini, the Morris Mini, the car designed by Sir Alec Isagonis, 55 inches wide, 120 inches long, 53 inches high, 1,500 pounds soaking wet. This car was more like a go-kart. In its heyday, it raced, and it raced well. It was third in the 1963 Monte Carlo Rally. In 1964, it was first and fourth. In 1965, it was first. In 1967, it was first. And in 1968, it was third, fourth, and fifth. The Mini won one or more international rally events in 1960, 62, 64, 65, 66, 67, and 72. It won European Touring Car Championships in 64 and 68. I saw one autocrossing as late as 2001. This car is iconic. So iconic that they revived it as a larger, arguably better looking, more practical car. But the original Mini, because of the number of years it was built and the number of races it won, I would say it's second only to the Porsche 911 as a true automobile phenomenon of the 20th century. And I guess you'd lump the VW Beetle in there too. And last but not least, the Ferrari F40. And I know that's kind of halfway cheating. The Ferrari F40 was a supercar, but it was designed as a street legal vehicle and was then adapted to racing. And it did pretty well as a race car. So yeah, I know, even though it was a street vehicle, it was designed with racing technology, blah, 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 blah. But all the same, it was a street car that was adapted for racing, and it did pretty well in racing. And now the honorable mentions. So the honorable mentions include the Lotus 7, the original Lotus 7, the Datsun 510, the Datsun Z, the Volkswagen GTI. Each of these cars was successful in its own right, both as a street vehicle and as a racing vehicle. So that's my list. Feel free to comment below, like, share, and subscribe. And if you would make revisions or have a list of your own, put that in the comments too. Thanks.